This podcast is proud to be part of the TalkSport Fan Network. TalkSport. Powered by fans.
It's a goal! What a goal! It's absolutely world class from Marcus Tunde!
Johnson puts it in the air. Aidan Flynn wins the goal! It's still with Lee Gregory. He's in the box. Tries to screw it. Is it going to be there? Yes! Oh my word!
The Wednesday Week!
Hello, good evening, and welcome to the episode of the Wednesday Week. Hello from the other side edition. Tonight, I'm joined by Steve Grant from the Total Saints podcast as we talk about the upcoming fixture this weekend, one that I'm pretty sure they should all be calling the Danfudge Derby in... A lot of production value happening today, Steve. It's not too shabby, is it? I tell you what it is.
I like that.
Yeah, I spent a lot of time making those, so you're getting them all. You're getting them all. And the first one there, the main titles, just give me, memories of happier times, given the way this season going. Now, Steve, tell us about your show. Tell us about your podcast. Tell us about how often we are, how long has it been going, all the rest of it.
Yeah, so Total Saints podcast has been running probably about four and a bit years now, I think. I've been involved for the last 3 of that, which up until this season has been largely a miserable experience. Yes, we broadcast live every Sunday night on basically all of the channels, so YouTube, Twitch, Facebook, Twitter, X, whatever you want to call it, Instagram, probably left something out there as well, at 7:15 every Sunday, and then also the sort of audio only version hits everybody's feeds on first thing Monday morning.
Yeah, I'm sure it probably helps out. If you've had a good result, I've noticed the listeners go up on a Monday morning as people are driving to work. Now, Steve, just you probably don't know this, but I just for the listeners back in Sheffield right now, for the ones that have listened to the show for a while, I lived in Southampton for about 15 years. And I now live further down the south coast in Brighton. And, every year I regret getting a season ticket. So this year is no different. However, back in the first game of the season, back in August, I made the trip again. And it's a long way to go. And the first game of the season, some would argue we didn't play the Saints team that are playing now. And arguably, given the form that you're in of late, James Ward-Who is what everybody's probably thinking now, right?
Well, you look at our results since the end of September, and there's a case that we're now a more coherent unit, certainly.
Mm-hmm.
But would any of us have Ward-Prowse back in our central midfield? Absolutely. How he's not made it into the England squad in the last couple of rounds of internationals is baffling, quite frankly. But kind of not our fight to wage anymore.
Fair enough. Who else is on that list of people that have missed? Was Teller one of them?
Teller thought he'd scored, but it turned out it flicked off Adam Armstrong's probably one of his hairs at the end of his forehead. So he was given the goal instead. I'm trying to think who else. I know Romeo Lavia was on the bench, but never made it off of there.
That's right.
Other than that, I don't think there were many.
Well, it's not a too shabby list, just that 3 to be fair, Steve, is it? Let's be honest. So let's talk about that game up at Hillsborough where you absolutely passed us to death. Now, unbeknownst to us at this point in time, we had a terrible manager in charge, and we had what some could argue. I mean, all right, it's changed a little bit recently. Some could argue he'd made some absolute terrible, god awful signings as well that had just not clicked. Now, somehow that game finished 2-1, and you had, I want to say, all of the ball the whole time, the entire 90 minutes at this point. You must have thought, this league's a piece of piss, right? You must have thought you were going to sail up that league.
There was certainly a lot of reaction to that effect. I mean, you don't get. I mean, what did we get? 1,000 passes in the end that night, I think, which was just mental. I mean, I think the thing that impressed me the most about us that night was the way we handled injury time, because obviously that was back at the time where there was the big crackdown on time wasting. Every little indiscretion is going to be a yellow card. Everything's going to be added on, and we had double figures at the end of both halves. And yet, I think you had two. We gave you 2 touches in the whole of injury time.
Yep.
And it was just like, oh, okay. We kind of know how to deal with this now. But as it turned out, I think that was a little bit of a false picture. We're certainly not as pass happy as that now. We're a lot more pragmatic when we need to, basically because we got our pants pulled down by Sunderland and Leicester, conceding 9 goals in 2 games, and everyone realised, yeah, we're not going to be able to do this to that extent. I think we were, beneficiaries of a relatively kind start, with no disrespect sort of meant, but playing a team that had come up through the playoffs where you're already at a 2-week disadvantage to the other 2 teams you've come up with. And of course, with all the off-field shenanigans that was going on at your place over the summer, it didn't feel like you were ready.
No, I'd agree with that.
Really. But actually, the game's a lot closer than the statistics, and kind of the way that everyone sort of took a look at the way we played and thought, well, we're going to batter teams if we play like that.
Yeah.
But actually, we didn't really create that many chances in the end. It was a lot of possession for possession's sake. And while it looked pretty and we kept possession and we played these nice little pretty triangles, it was all in front of you. We didn't really get your defence turned very much. It was only when the 2 wingers managed to run at the fullbacks. I mean, Patterson, bless him, had a torrid time against Sam Adozie, first half. But other than that, I kind of thought we didn't do that much until the last 20 minutes, where suddenly we kind of picked the pace up a little bit. Once we started operating with a little bit more pace, force that defence into sort of having to act a lot quicker and react quicker, all of a sudden we started creating some chances. And I think we deserved to win, but it wasn't as comfortable as a lot of people like to make out, I think.
Yeah, I think the passing stats, like you say, were kind of flattered to deceive somewhat, because when it actually manifested itself to shots on goal and goals converted, stats wise, it was a drubbing 9-0 for us the other way. You know what I mean? And somehow we got one back and made it a tense ending to that game. Now, as I mentioned at the top of the show, I lived in Southampton for 15 years, and so I kind of knew all about Liebe. I used to borrow my girlfriend at the time's dad's season ticket through the UEFA Cup runs and the Koeman times, and then him moving to Everton, it falling to shit, and then Marcus Liebe passing away, and all the rest of it. Where are we now with Saints and the relationship with the fans? Because there was a point where it passed on to his daughter, and everybody was incredulous that she didn't really give as much as a shit as her dad did, and it became a noose around her neck, and people complained about that. Where are we with that now? Where does that sit right now?
I think, I think that assessment is a little bit harsh on her. I mean, got to remember, Marcus actually passed away before we were even promoted out of League One.
Yeah.
So she had sole ownership for a long time, which basically coincided with the good years, really. So she was 100% owner through promotion out of League One, promotion straight through the Championship, and basically up until Koeman left. So I think it was maybe that season, once Claude Puel had been appointed, and he was fine as well. Got us to a cup final.
And one of the best cup finals I've seen in a lot of years as well.
I mean, it was infuriating because we should have won that.
Yeah. If had it not been for Zlatan,
I mean, Zlatan. I've just got this awful record of games where he's playing and I'm there in person. I've seen 3 games of Zlatan live. We played away against United that season. He scored twice, and obviously scored twice in the cup final. And then I was also present in Stockholm when he scored those 4 goals against England in that friendly.
Brilliant.
So yeah, I'm delighted he's retired. Yeah.
So who's in charge now? Are the funds starting to become available? I mean, obviously you made a few quid in the transfer window and made mega money in terms of Championship, and then you've got obviously the much maligned parachute payments and all the rest of it. Is this getting reinvested back into the club?
I mean, I would say we've basically broken even under current ownership. So the current owners, company called Sports Republic, who are kind of the front man is Rasmus Ankerson, who you may remember was kind of one of the data guys at Brentford. Kind of sort of second in command to Matthew Benham there. And he's kind of now fronting up this new organisation. They're trying to go down this multi-club ownership structure, which I hate, but that's kind of by the by for the time being now, because they currently only own, I think, 2 clubs. Got a second division side in Turkey as well, but they've got the money is coming from a Serbian businessman called Dragan Solic, who used to be in media over there. He used to have the biggest sort of TV broadcasting station. But because he was kind of anti current government, he was pushed to one side and his licenses were revoked and things like that. So he's basically binned all of that off now, and I'm not actually sure what he's doing in terms of generating any extra funds, but certainly he's got enough to fund what he wants to do from a sporting sense. So they've been in since the start of last season. Is that right? No, sorry, the January the year before. So so that basically the summer before last, so obviously the start of our relegation season was their first summer as owners. And we spent a bit of money, but it was all on sort of youth, sort of young players who you could bring them in, polish them up and sell them on for a profit. Which the idea is fine, but you're still trying to stay afloat in Premier League football, and obviously they made a bit of a pig's ear of it in the end. Not helped by appointing Nathan Jones, which was, I mean, you'll go some way to find a worse appointment in Premier League history, I reckon.
He still believes he's big news, though, given the
best coach in Europe.
Best coach in Europe is what he said when Southampton were lost about 5 on the bounce, if I remember rightly. It came on the back of that. Now, Southampton have been known for being a bit of a selling club. Given the time I was there, everybody was up in arms. I mean, I remember that summer when I think the first one to go was Dejan Lovren. And then it's like he texted a WhatsApp group at the team and went, "Lads, we're all going to Liverpool. Who's coming?" And I think about 5 of them went up there. There was Milner, there was Lambert. There was
from us it was Lambert, Lallana, and Lovren all went to Liverpool. Shaw went to Man United, and who was the other one?
Van Dijk, I think, a couple of years later.
He was much later. So Van Dijk came in the year after that exodus.
Right.
So he was a fair bit later. We actually brought in Toby Alderweireld on loan to replace Lovren, and he was brilliant. We had a deal to sign him, but Atletico basically screwed us over because they got more money from Spurs. But we replaced those guys with Graziano Pella, Dusan Tadic, Sadio Mane, Victor Wanyama. So it wasn't a bad
halcyon days as well. They were fun days.
That team was absolutely incredible. And it was probably Koeman's best time as a manager, I reckon, in terms of demonstrating his tactical flexibility, man management, because both of those things are things that he's notably struggled at with other clubs he's managed.
Absolutely. Everton namely being the main one. I remember everybody was genuinely like, there's a few players that'll go and you're like, all right, fair enough, it's a bigger club. But with Koeman to go to Everton, who I mean, he'd just taken Southampton to a 7th or 8th.
6th.
Oh, yeah, and you broke into the UEFA Cup or Europa League that year. And then he went to Everton that had finished something like 13th, 14th or something. And it just seemed like a big step down. But that's when Mashiri had just gone in. He said, I've got all this money to spend. And he just didn't live up to standards. But anyway, listen, we could reminisce about the old days as much as we like. So I'll tell you what I do have. I have the lineup against your credible 1-1 draw against Norwich away at Carrow Road. Now, that's a credible result. And I annoyingly, that's your worst result in the last 5 games as well, because I think that's the only draw and the rest have been wins over the last 5 games. So looking at that lineup there on the screen, I mean, is there going to be any mega changes this Saturday?
So Aribo's not available because he's in the Nigeria squad for AFCON. So he's away for the foreseeable. And Sam Adosi's out injured probably about the same time, probably for the whole month. We imagine, with a ankle injury that he took when Jack Stacey decided that he was chasing down. Adosi kind of got to the byline to put a crossover, and Stacey did that usual sort of defenders thing of getting there just late enough to stamp on his ankle. So yeah,
that old chestnut. Well, that's great news for Callum Patterson, then, isn't it?
Yes, it is. Yeah, yeah. He'll just have Ryan Fraser to deal with instead.
Oh, that's all right then. Great.
So this is
really going to be a big test, isn't it?
Yeah, I would say I would probably imagine actually Jack Stevens, even though he's club captain, I think he'll probably step down. So Walker Peters will go back to his familiar position of right back, because that lineup there where Stevens has basically been shoehorned into the team, it kind of unbalanced us a little bit. We weren't quite at our best on New Year's Day, so I would imagine we'll go back to the sort of previous normal lineup of Walker Peters at right back, Manning left back, Harwood Bellis and Bednarek, and then the midfield you can kind of pick three from 6. I think Flynn Downs is probably the only one guaranteed his place if he's fit, because he's had these weird illness problems all season. He managed to give himself E. coli by not cooking chicken properly. It's like,
he's a medium rare guy. What can I say?
Yeah. Insane.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. Okay, so let's talk about further that then. So, if I'd have spoke to you 8 weeks ago, this would have been a pipe dream. But are you guys looking at playoffs, or are you going to go straight for the pie and you're thinking, I want to get straight back down and straight back out of this league? Let's get back up to the promised land. Or are you like us thinking, I wish Ipswich would just fuck off?
Well, Ipswich remind me of us from 12, 13 years ago when we went straight through, in that they didn't seem to have that many sort of out and out stars at that point. Although obviously the team that we had that went up, obviously a number of stars emerged from it, the likes of Lallana, Lambert, Schneiderlin, Fontaine, people like that. But at the time, you look at Ipswich's team, and while they're good players, obviously individually, you look at them and you don't necessarily think, well, who would you take out of that Ipswich side and put in Leicester's team, for example?
Yeah.
There's probably 1, maybe 2 players.
Yeah.
Whereas they've just got a system that works for them, and they're obviously full of confidence. Then they're a team that's used to winning games of football, and their system has worked even despite the step up in quality that they've had. Plymouth not coping quite so well, but they're basically doing, Plymouth are basically the Brighton to us when we went up as runners up to them back in 2011. So I think there's symmetry there, but I mean I do think that we've got, now that we've kind of ironed out the problems that everybody saw from us in September, where we were an absolute mess. We've gone a bit more pragmatic. Russell Martin has accepted that, I tried to push this a little bit too far, and it didn't quite work, and it's made us all look a bit stupid. Now we're getting into a situation where we're not just grinding out the wins, which we were at the start of the season. All of our wins in the first 2 or 3 months were by the odd goal. But we're now starting to get games at home where we are battering teams. So
Yeah.
Blackburn we've stuck 4 on, Swansea
Swansea.
stuck 5 on.
Yeah, that was a hell of a goal in that Swansea
Yeah.
game as well, wasn't there? I remember
Yeah,
one of them.
but they are.
Shit.
I mean, but both of those teams came to play,
Mhm.
and they left themselves a little bit open in the second half,
Right.
and we basically picked them off in the last 25 minutes. It's been the key thing for us this season. There's been a number of late goals we've scored. I think we've earned about 10 or 11 points from goals in the last 5 minutes. And that comes from the system. That comes from having all of that possession, forcing the opposition to be constantly on the move and tracking and checking what's behind them, and it's exhausting. And in the end, you grind them down, and you get the rewards late in the game. So that's kind of the one big justification, I think, for Russell Martin's system that he's devised, that it allows us to know that as long as we are in the game with 10-15 minutes to go, we fancy our chances, and that will be the case against anybody in this division, I imagine.
Yeah, absolutely. So before we wrap this up, then, Steve, what about predictions? How are you feeling? You feeling confident? Are you feeling? We've had a decent upturn in form, but I don't know if we've got to Southampton level upturn of form just yet. I mean, if you saw the cup game against Cardiff, we won 4-0, but for some reason
that was a weird old start, wasn't it?
Honestly, I was saying on the podcast last night that I had more fun watching the first 7 minutes of that game than what I did with the entirety of the first 12 games and the entire time under Pulis and Josh Lukai 5 years ago. So, that was a hell of a start to a game, but it wasn't a comprehensive win, even though the scoreline would suggest that. So, how are you feeling? Let's get a prediction together.
Yeah, I'll always be confident of us at home now. We're seven wins in a row at home. I think we've conceded twice in that time. So yeah, we're looking very strong at home. And yeah, I think ultimately when you're in third place and you're playing against a team in the bottom three, you're going to be expected to win. That's
Absolutely.
ultimately the expectation is actually probably the one thing that might hold us back. But so far, in this run, the fan base has shown a remarkable level of patience, which I must admit I didn't think we had it in us, based on previous years. But we're not concerned if it's goalless into the second half, because we know that we've got the strength. Well, yeah, and we've got a lot of strength off the bench. Che Adams generally doesn't start games, and yet he's coming on with 20 minutes, half an hour to go to.
I tell you what, Steve, I'm sorry to cut in there on you. Che Adams, for me, right? So, he managed to break into the Scotland squad. Doesn't score enough goals for me. It reminds me a lot of, who was the guy you had before him? Redmond. Like, did a lot of running, looks really exciting, but couldn't seem to finish his dinner. Do you feel like Adams was an upgrade from Redmond?
They're different players. I'd say Redmond is more of a wide player that can play through the middle, whereas Adams is your sort of stereotypical number 9. Can play with his back to goal, good in the air, reasonably strong. Not got an awful lot of pace, but he's got that little bit of sharpness occasionally. But yeah, his finishing is what lets him down. Which is why I was amazed, like Sky Sports News earlier today, saying, "Oh, 3 Premier League sides are interested in him." It's like, why? Why?
Snap their hand off. Get him, Steve. Get him all.
But this is the thing. He's out of contract in the summer.
Right.
So if one of those 3 teams does put some money on the table, whether it's 3-4 million quid, something of that order, I would imagine, given how long's left on his deal. And he's on, I would imagine, 40 grand a week, give or take. Then I would imagine, I'd be surprised if we didn't take it.
And I think he'd snap your hand off as well, given the Euros coming up as well, and
definitely
needing Premier League football.
He was, he basically was putting in performances in August. As soon as the transfer window shut and he didn't get that move to Wolves that seemed to be basically nailed on, all of a sudden he wasn't interested. So, quite frankly, I'd have just bombed him out at that point. But because we obviously spent the money on Ross Stewart, who came in and has played 15 minutes of first team football and is now likely out for the season, we've kind of had to go back to to Shea and say, look, you might get your move in January, you might not, but at the end of the day, you're playing for a place in Germany next summer. So pull your finger out and let's see you actually scoring some goals. And in fairness, he's got 4 in his last 7, I think. So
yeah,
that's a decent return if you're getting those sort of goals from him. And Adam Armstrong's got 13, I think, for the season, and players from midfield are contributing. So I think we've got plenty of goals in us. That was the issue at the start of the season, was we're not finishing the chances we're creating, whereas now we are. So it then comes down to how well other teams can defend against us. I don't know how Danny Rolls set you up so far in defensively. Whether his attitude has been right, let's be solid first, and then we'll look to go forward. I think that would be the most sensible approach. But he may have better ideas.
I tell you what, there was no way to go when you were. When you're bottom of the league with nowhere to go, you have to just try and improve everywhere as much as you can. It just by any kind of shade at any point. But Roll's got us, keeping the ball out. We've just signed a goalkeeper that's highly rated. We've just loaned him from Brighton via Oxford. So we'll see how that goes, because our goalkeepers come under a serious amount of flack. And there'll be a few people listening to that laughing because it's me that's been giving it to him. So so that's fun. But yeah, go on. I know I cut you off earlier. So give me a score prediction then, Steve.
I think we should still have enough. Even though obviously your results have been massively improved in this second quarter of the season, so have ours. So I still think that ultimately the quality should still tell out. And I think it'll probably be a 2-0.
Yeah, could happen. I think it's going to be a tough ask. I think a low scoring draw is probably the best we can ask for, and I think that's probably what I said on the pod last night. I hope it is. Normally I write it down. Yeah, I did. I went with 1-1, so that's all right. Steve, listen, thanks a lot, ladies and gents. Steve from Total Saints Podcast.